Have you ever known what it feels like to be content? I mean, really content, satisfied, fulfilled, at ease, at peace. You might say, well, I used to smoke a lot of weed and, that kind of... No, I'm not talking about something artificially induced feeling, okay? Not some escape from reality, but an actual, real sense, solid state of mind of truly being content, of truly being happy with your life. You may not... There's some of us here that may not have ever experienced really that in our life, never experienced just true contentment. Most people in the world only experience that rarely, and it usually doesn't last very long. Contentment is really, really hard to find. Why is that? Why is it so hard to find contentment, fulfillment, peace, joy in life? Why does it seem like when we reach it, it doesn't last for very long? Well, I've been thinking about that a good bit lately, and we all have desires. We all have our ideas of the way that we feel like things ought to be, that we want our life to be. And we have these desires, and some of them are we have little desires, and if those desires aren't met, well, it's okay, no big deal. If the Golden State Warriors don't win the championship, well, we can deal with that, it's all right. But then we have these big desires, these major desires. And this is the way we want things to be. This is the way we think things ought to be. And then this is the way things are. This is what we're living in. And there's a gap, sometimes a very large gap, between the way we want it to be and the way my life is in reality now. And that gap is what gives birth to discontentment. It's where I become discontented because my life, my desires are not being met. We all have various major desires. We have desires. Many of us have career desires. We want our career to advance. We want to enjoy what we do. We want to be competent in what we do. We want to be good at it. We want to be respected in what we do. We want to be well compensated in what we do. We have these kind of career goals, these desires for our career. Most all of us probably have some financial desires. We would like to have enough money to buy what we think we need, and even buy most of what we want, and still have money left over where we felt secure about our future and all that kind of stuff. We have a certain desire about what we'd like our finances to be like. Many of us have desires, really heavy desires about our relationships. We want good friendships. We want good family relationships. If you're married, you want this good relationship with your spouse. You desire to have a real partnership with them. You desire to be honored and loved and respected by them. You have sexual desires that you desire to be fulfilled. You have desires for significance that you get from that partner that you have. You have a lot of desires that are bound up in that marriage relationship. And those aren't all met, are they? You start on that road of you first get married and you date and you first get married, and I mean that person just hung the moon and they are just the fulfillment of your every desire, and then time goes on and reality starts settling back into things, and you discover that they're just as messed up as you and at least as selfish as you, and how is this going to work? How's this going to pan out? Because now I have these desires and my reality, and there's a gap. Most of us don't have as much money as we would like to have. I mean, our financial condition is not as good as we would like it to be. I mean, there's this certain standard we have, and then there's where we are, and it's not there. But there's all these major desires, and at many points in our life, there is a gap between what we desire and what we have. And out of that gap, discontentment is born. If you're single, you have, perhaps you may just be happy being single. You may want to be single for the rest of your life. Or you may desire to have all those things that a married couple would have or would want to have, and you have that desire built in. And so this discontentment is just, it's just there with you all the time. Your major desires may be something totally different than anything I've said, but you've got them. You've got things that you really want in life. So what do you do when your life, when your reality does not match up with what your desires are? How do you respond to that gap? I feel like there may be more, okay? There probably are more, but I feel like there's two major ways that we tend to respond to this discontentment, okay? One possibility is this. We resign ourselves to be discontent. We just resign ourselves to being disappointed. It's not going to happen. Things aren't going to be the way I want them to be. I'm just going to have to live with it. And so I settle into a low-grade bitterness. Okay? This low-grade bitterness. And you can detect this in somebody because they tend to be cynical, often sarcastic, often just generally negative, very critical of others. Just sort of this generally negative outlook on life because they have resigned to being disappointed. Things just aren't going to be the way they ought to be. That's a way we can respond to that. Another common way that we respond to it, many of you, is you fight for your contentment. You fight for your desires, okay? If your desire is for career advancement, you have this desire, you work long hours, you give everything you've got, you work hard to make your career the way you want it to be, and you make sacrifices in a lot of different areas because you want that career to be the way it's going to be. If your desires are for your relationships, you fight for your relationships. And if that doesn't work, you fight in your relationships. You fight the people in those relationships, whether that be your spouse or your friends or your children or your parents or whoever it is that's not holding up their end of the relationship. You fight for it, in it. And really people like that often accomplish a lot in life. Those fighters, they often accomplish a lot. They often have success in a lot of things that they do. They also tend to leave a lot of burned bridges, a lot of estranged relationships behind. But worst of all, and almost cruelly, they do not find contentment, the very thing that they really were after. It really is an almost a cruel thing that this discontentment is born out of the gap between what I want and what I have. But fulfilling that desire, working toward making that desire happen so that I have what I want, it turns out that it doesn't make us content, at least not for very long at all. It's almost like a whack-a-mole game. Have you ever played whack-a-mole? You got this big little club, and the moles pop up, and one pops up, and you hit it. One pops up, and you hit it. You have one desire, and so I'll satisfy that desire. But as soon as I satisfy the desire, another one pops up, and then okay, get that one. There's another one. Get that one, and then this one that I'd already taken care of. Now it's up again. It's no longer fixed. It was fixed, and now it's no longer. And it's just this whack-a-mole thing, and it never ends. It's infuriating. It's endless. I think of it in excuse the somewhat gross illustration. I think of it as a ringworm, okay? I had this experience one time. I took a youth group to St. Louis to this big youth rally. And part of this youth rally, and a big part of the attraction, of course, was that you spent one day at Six Flags in St. Louis. Okay, so you had this day at Six Flags. So Six Flags had all the roller coasters and all the stuff, but it also had this water park built into it, okay? And so I've been riding and stuff with kids and went over to the water park side because it was hot. It was end of July. It was just searingly hot. And there was this huge wave pool. And there must have been, I'm not exaggerating, there must have been thousands of people in this wave pool because it was huge and it was shoulder to shoulder across the entire thing. And why I got into it, I don't know. I remember going out there and just bumping against everybody because the waves are coming and you're just bouncing against everything. And I remember one wave coming and me going underwater and having the thought, what is in this water? After that thought, I got out pretty quickly. But it was too late. Soon after, this little spot showed up on my face, on my cheek. Didn't know what it was. And just I tried to put lotion and stuff. It just didn't work. And finally, somebody noticed it had this circular. It got this circular shape to it, and they said that looks like a ringworm. I'm like, well, gross. Okay, so I go home and I look up ringworm, and it's a fungus of some kind. So I got me some antifungal cream, and I'm putting it on that ringworm deal. And sure enough, it gradually would clear it up. But then about the time it got better, it would show up over here. And I would get the cream, and I would get over here, and it would kind of go away, and it would show up somewhere else. It was just moving around my face. And finally, if I remember right, I went to the doctor. He gave me some pill, some medicine to take inside my body to kill it, because all that topical treatment was just moving it around. It took something inside of me to actually take care of the problem. I see contentment a lot that way. When I try to become content by fulfilling all these desires, fixing all the situations outside of me, get this fixed, get this problem fixed, get this desire fulfilled, get this. It just moves the desire around. The discontentment just seems to flow somewhere else. And it takes something seriously powerful inside of me to fix it, to kill that discontentment, to give me a real and lasting satisfaction. We've been looking a lot at the book of Philippians, this small letter that Paul wrote from jail to the church in Philippi. And we're almost to the end. I think this is the second to last lesson we're going to have of Philippians. Almost to the end. And it took to the end before we realized something real important about the book. And that is that Paul wasn't just writing this letter to these Christians in Philippi just because he wanted to, help them with problems they are having. He was doing that. Just because he wanted to address things in their lives, he was doing that. But Paul was also writing a thank you note, because it turns out that the church in Philippi had heard that Paul was in prison far away, probably Rome. And when they found out about it, they got a big collection together. And they financed one of their members, a guy named Epaphroditus, to travel hundreds of miles over land and sea, of course, without planes, without boats, to get to where Paul was in prison and give him this gift. And Paul was also sending his note back with Epaphroditus saying thank you. And it's here at the end of the book that he finally brings this up. And before he really gets very far into the thank you, he wants them to understand something about his mindset, about his life. He has received this gift and he is thankful for it. He is blessed by it. But he wants them to understand something, and that is, he's okay. He's okay. With their gift, without the gift, whatever's going on, he's really okay. We're going to look at this. It's very powerful. Paul says this, I rejoice greatly in the Lord that at last you renewed your concern for me. Indeed, you were concerned, but you had no opportunity to show it. Now he kind of diverts a little bit. He says, I'm not saying this because I am in need, for I have learned to be content, whatever the circumstances. I know what it is to be in need, and I know what it is to have plenty. I have learned the secret of being content in any and every situation, whether well-fed or hungry, whether living in plenty or in want. Takes this little diversion away from his thank you to say, I really appreciate the gift, but I want you to know that I'm happy. I'm content. Things in my life are not very good right now. I'm not in a good place. I've had times in my life where I've had loving people all around me, but I have had times in my life, and I'm experiencing them right now, where I'm very alone, where I'm very, very solitary for most of the time, and the company that is around me is not very pleasant. prison's not the greatest thing, and I don't know what's going to happen to me. I'm going to be sentenced to something. I'm about to go on trial. I do not know what's going to happen. Do not know what the outcome is going to be. But I want you guys to know that I am content. Whether I've got food, whether I don't have food. Whether I've got people who love me around me, whether I'm very alone. Whether I don't, there's a lot of things that I don't want to be that way, but I want you to know that even if all of the human desires that I have, and Paul had them, even if all these human desires that I have are unmet, I'm still content. And that's really hard for us to believe. That's really hard for us to, it's like, how is that? I mean, how can you be content in prison, especially after you've been in prison for, say, 2 or 3 years already, and you don't know when you're going to get out, if ever going to get out? How can you be content? What is that? Paul says, I found the secret. I found the secret. I found that thing that goes inside of me, that change that has happened inside of me that has made me content, whether I'm doing well or whether the situations in my life really stink. I found the secret. And of course, whether you're a Christian or not, you're curious, okay? You're curious, okay, what's the secret? Okay, what is this secret where you can be content no matter what? And I'm just going to confess to you right now, and I'm just going to prepare you for it, okay? That throughout my life, as I would read this, even knowing what was coming, I know the secret. I found the secret of being content. And then he would say it. And my reaction would be, what? You'll understand, I think, okay, if you don't have this memorized already. Here is the secret, Paul says, of being content. I can do all this through him who gives me strength. That's not what I was looking for, okay? I was looking, okay, Paul, give me some steps. Give me something practical. Tell me, okay, what is it that I need to do in order to be content? What is it that I need to know? Or what is it that I need to have in my life? What is the secret? And Paul says, no. It's not a what. It's not a what at all. It's a who. Now, I don't have a 12-step plan to being content. I don't have a, hey, if you'll do this. God makes me content. I find my contentment in God. Now, if you've been with us the last 3 weeks, this is very consistent to what Paul has been saying leading up to this point. Right? Remember, he told us to rejoice always. Well, how can you rejoice always? Well, he says, no, it's not rejoicing in yourself, in your situation, in your success. He says, rejoice in the Lord. Rejoice in what the Lord has done for you, in what he is doing for you, in what he has planned for you. You get your joy. I get my joy from him. That's where it comes from. He says, don't be anxious about anything. Well, how do I not be anxious about anything? He says, hey, you give it to him. You trust in him. You give that over to him, and you let him handle it, and you do what you can do, and you leave the anxiety to him because you trust him. And he says, and God's peace will fill your life. As you think about him, as you think about the things of God, the things that are true, the things that are pure, the things that are right, God's peace is going to fill you up, and you're going to have this peace that people can't even understand. It's like everything that Paul says, it all comes back to this one thing: to desire and to pursue and to experience God. Throughout my life, I've heard this verse right here used in a lot of ways, and pretty well misused in a lot of ways. Maybe you've heard an athlete or somebody say, I can do everything through Christ who gives me strength. And, I can throw a football 80 yards through Christ who gives me strength. Or I can be the CEO of a major company through Christ who gives me strength. I can find my car keys through Christ who gives me strength. I can do all things through Christ who gives me strength. In other words, through Christ's strength, I can have whatever I want. Which is exactly the opposite of what Paul is actually saying. Because what Paul is actually saying is, through Christ's strength, I can be content with whatever I have. Discontentment, as we mentioned, is born from this gap between what we desire and what we have. And what Paul had done, how Paul had discovered this secret is this. And if you miss everything else that I say, then just hear this one thing. Paul's major desire, his one major desire, was to have God, was to be filled with God, was to know God, was to live in Him, was to experience God. That was Paul's secret, is that his desire, his one major desire, was that he might have God. And all the other desires were secondary. So basically, every other human desire that Paul had could be unmet, and he was still okay. He was still content. He was still, in his being, truly joyful, truly happy. Paul's solution, his secret to contentment, was to make God his one major desire. See, God did not design us. He didn't design us to be content with pleasure, success, financial stability, with status. He didn't design us to be content with those things. And we aren't. We are not. He designed us to be content with Him. So it comes down to this. You will find lasting contentment in God, or you won't find it at all. Some of us are in the middle of a lifelong search, really a lifelong search. We want something. We don't know exactly what to call it necessarily, but contentment might be one way that we could refer to it. We're chasing after it. You know it's there, and you want it, and it really is there, but it's not found in raising a family. It's not found in having a successful career. It's not found in any achievement or any stroke of luck, but it is as near to you as God is, and He is incredibly near to you. You may have believed in God all your life. You may have, believed there is a God and even prayed to a God, but God, perhaps to you, has always been, He's always been God out there. He's been God out there somewhere. He doesn't want to be God to you. He wants to be your God. He wants to be your God. Paul, just a few verses later, after he's thanked them and everything for his gift, he says this. He says, "And my God will meet all your needs according to the riches of His glory in Christ Jesus." You see, to Paul, he wasn't just God. He was my God. My God, who meets all of my needs, is going to meet all of yours as well. God was Paul's everything. He was everything to Paul. And so this morning, I want to invite you to abandon your pursuit of happiness through the fulfillment of your desires and to pursue God. I want to invite you to abandon your pursuit of happiness through the fulfillment of your desires and instead pursue God. It won't be a long journey to Him because He's been patiently waiting all along. but it will be an incredible journey with Him. And this morning, if you need to pray with somebody who you knows cares about your soul, cares about your life, and maybe you're even at a place where you don't even know what to pray for, you don't feel like you know how to seek God. We're going to have a song is going to play, and during that, we're going to have some elders that'll be standing in the back who would love to pray with you, who'd love to talk to you, who'd love to just serve you in however they can. But perhaps as this song plays, you may just want to pray to God right from where you are. Just seek God right from where you are, because He wants to be found by you. He really is. He really is everything.